Welcome to It's a Woman's World, where we meet achieving women making a difference in our world. Our guest is Dr. Ludy Green, one of the world's foremost experts on economic empowerment for victims of abuse. Dr. Green is a keynote speaker, author, founder of Second Chance Employment Services, and executive producer of Ending Domestic Abuse podcast called the Resource Center for Victims of Violence. She served 4 presidents, bringing the voice of victims to the table so policies can be revised with those experiences in consideration, including assisting with the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act of 2013. Welcome, Ludy. You were on our show in 2014, and it's wonderful to have you back. You've done such important work for victims of domestic violence, and October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so it's perfect timing.
Carolyn, I'm very honored to be in your program again after 10 years. I can't believe that time has passed by so quickly. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'll be happy to share the latest things going on right now with my work and basically violence against women in our nation.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes. And as we're going to hear from you, I know that there's certainly enough violence that we need to be very aware and alert, and hopefully with your help these victims. So let's do a little background. You're known, of course, as I just said, as one of the world's foremost experts on economic empowerment for victims of abuse and domestic violence against women. So, but how would you get into this kind of work?
Early years, when I was an intern in Capitol Hill, I was working for a congressman. I decided to go and grab a sandwich at the Longworth building. And I saw on a volunteer board a little ad that was saying there was a shelter for battered women looking for volunteers. And that intrigued me, and I wanted to know what it was all about. So I called them, and then I went and decided to volunteer. And I realized that there was a place where they were taking care of victims of violence, women who are being victims of domestic abuse and their children, and touched my heart and my soul. So going there and becoming a volunteer of them and learning how the women were coming to the shelter, staying there for a little while, and then going back to the abuser, it started becoming to me, like a question. I started inquiring, why was this happening to these ladies? Why were they returning to the abuser? So I conducted a small survey. At that time, I was going to college as well, created a survey with questions. And in the questions, I asked them what was the reason why they were doing that. And basically, most of the ladies, well, basically all of them, they said they did not have a job. They did not have a background, no education, and they depended on their husband financially. So they didn't want to take the risk to be on the streets with their children. And that was the reason they were trapped in those abusive relationships. And that's when my life mission started it, on that shelter.
That's amazing. And you've done so many different things now with your life's mission. I know you've written a book, and you also have a podcast. But let's start off now discussing your new initiative, assisting faith-based communities in creating a domestic violence policy.
So basically, I'll give you a little background. I was a presenter in a university in Philadelphia, and I met Dr. Andy Johnson, who basically is the author of Men's Religion and Domestic Violence. It's a book. It's a wonderful book. It's basically a book that is a textbook for colleges and universities. And he asked me to write a chapter for that book. He said, Ludy, I think with your expertise, I would like to see how can you approach the faith-based community and bring an understanding. How can we work with religion and faith-based community and men in domestic violence against women? So it was very intriguing to me. And that's what I came up with this. I proposed the title. I said, well, what about assisting religious institutions in creating a domestic violence policy? And it was a hit. And he loved it. So he put me in the chapter 26 of his book, which is very, very big book. And every college and universities around the nation, they use it. And it was published by Springer in 2015. So now from there, I'm coming out with this new concept about start meetings with these faith-based communities and promoting this idea that will basically would prevent violence against women and children.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. We're going into your book a little bit. The Guide to Economic Freedom, right? Ending Domestic Violence, Captivity, Guide to Economic Freedom. You said something up before you stepped down from Second Chance. What were you doing? You were thinking of writing this book or writing this chapter?
Yeah. So, it was a time that I think that the leadership, it has to pass on to someone else. I was there already about 12 years. But before that happened, before I stepped down, I felt that it was very important to start collecting the research, the information, all the things that we have done in the organization that have been successful, and put it together on a text, on a book that can be shared with social entrepreneurs who they can replicate the model. And one of the areas I thought could be universities, colleges.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah, that was amazing.
I want to show you the book. I want to show how the book looks.
Oh, yes.
Your audiences. So
great.
There was
Thank you.
Volcano Press, which I was very, very blessed to have been published by this lady. The lady from Volcano Press was the first publishing in the United States for books on domestic violence. So that was a wonderful thing that happened to me meeting her.
And I'm sorry, I was going to say, it's so impressive that it's in universities as well.
Yeah, so it's in universities. And so I feel like really, really honored. And then also in this book, you have all the methodology of how to create this employment agency for victims of abuse, all the steps along the way, so people can learn, can follow through. Not only they can create their own businesses, creating their own monies, their own business, and at the same time, helping the community and people who are suffering.
Yeah, right. That's amazing. You've done so many things, and you've also traveled a lot. You've traveled to many countries sharing your work. Can you share some of that with us?
Sure. So basically, I have been in so many countries. First, I got one of my appointments was as a cultural ambassador of the United States on Syria and Jordan. And on that time, I was sent by the United States to bring best practices to combat violence against women to these countries. So I will share in one of the countries. For example, in Syria, I had the opportunity to present with the Minister of Justice, Minister of Labor, all our best practices. And at the same time, I had the opportunity to present my work and my methodology on economic empowerment for victims, which I felt very honored because at that time in that year, which was 2009, this was before all the war and everything happened in Syria. And I was the last representative there from the United States in that country.
Yeah.
But it was unbelievable how well received I was. I was invited to universities. Most of them were males, though, the people who attended the universities, but they were very respectful. They listened, and I just followed all the things I needed to do and say and communicate, and also addresses the issue of human trafficking, because at that time I think they were in the tier 2 or 3. And so we needed, to just the reminders and all that. So it was very, very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. And speaking to men particularly, that you had mentioned to me that they're also victims of violence, and you don't realize it as much. You think of women right away.
Yes, exactly.
And during the pandemic, you created an initiative to rescue the victims because there were no shelters open for them and a few other things. What else did you do there?
So I will give you a little background. So during the lockdown pandemic, all the shelters were shut down in the DC metropolitan area. That's what we knew. No one can find a shelter. So at that time I was working, I was heading counter-trafficking in persons for USAID. So I was very busy with my work, but we still were locked down. So we couldn't get out of the house. Remember that time? I think it was the month of March or April.
Yeah. Oh, surely I remember everybody.
Yeah, it was 2020. It was just so bad. And so a lady came to my home and slipped a note under my door home. Yes. And in the note said, "Please help me. My husband is going to kill me." And she gave her name, first name, and a number. And I shared with my husband, and he was like, "Ludy, you need to be careful when you're working. You can't just go. You don't know, everything is shut down. Where are you going to go? How are you going to meet her?" And I felt that this woman could be my daughter, could have been my mother, could be me or my sister. So I just really, my heart hurt. And I'm like, I was so curious. I needed to know if this was real so I could help her. So I decided to give a call. And indeed, she was real. And then I gave her an address. Let's meet there was used to be a place on 49 and Massachusetts Avenue in Northwest, au Pan Quotidien, Le Pan Quotidien there. And then I said, oh, why don't we meet there? But it was not there. It was closed. Everything was closed.
Oh, right.
So
right.
I met her on that corner and she was real. And let me tell you, she showed me her neck, the scar from here to here. Her husband had cut her. And she was sharing that the problem was that the businesses were like not working. He had several businesses and his work started like falling apart. It was hemorrhaging his companies. And he was so stressed, started drinking at night, overwhelmed. And the reason she decided to come and ask for help is because he picked up her son, who was 4 years old, threw him against the wall, and the child got a concussion. Oh. So she said, I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So we discussed all that issue. And at that time, I was already gone from Second Chance, but I still have the connections, the sponsors, the friends, my community connections. So I call people, from lawyers, how to guide me through the whole process. And we guide her what to do, from collecting evidence, like pictures, times, what happened, all that stuff. Because if she could take the child with her, she could be, put in jail as she was kidnapping the son if there was no evidence or something. So there were details that we need to go collecting, so she will be able to be successful in rescuing her. So we so we rescue her. We find a place for her to stay until we ended up moving her to her parents in Philadelphia.
Great.
And from there, right now it's a huge success story. She has her own life. She speaks about it.
Great.
And, we're grateful.
As you're talking about this one woman, tell us the statistics about domestic violence against women in our country.
So basically, in the United States, 1 out of 4 women were victims of domestic abuse, according to the Department of Justice.
And you also have a stat for men.
Yes. So physical and mental abuse can happen to anyone. So we have 1 out of 9 men in the U.S. victims of abuse.
Wow. I never realized that. That's amazing.
They never spoke up. Nobody said much. And it was really quiet. It has been quiet all about men and abuse.
And they're probably embarrassed. And it's very, unbelievable. Tell us about the signs of a person who is in an abusive relationship.
Well, they start changing. Their behavior changes. For example, somebody who has been a happy, upbeat person who were always going out with you, they may withdraw. They become teary. You will see them more gloomy. They do not act like the same. So people who are suffering, who are going through something like that, they will not be acting the same. It's almost impossible to fake it that well,
And the types of abuse are what then?
Yeah, so we have different types of abuse. So we have 3 types: physical, emotional, and economic. On physical abuse, more likely recognized can be somebody you can see with bruises, when somebody hits you, somebody slaps you, somebody tries to choke you. So things that have been done with the hands and hurting others or using something to hurt a person physically, and it's being seen. That's the one that's most recognized by authorities, by everything, because we see it.
Yeah.
When we come with a second one, emotional, that is different. People use words to put you down, diminish you, humiliate you, make you feel bad, undermine you. So they use your mind to put you under their control. So then you start feeling that you don't have value, that you only can survive with those persons, with the people who's abusing you.
I see.
It's a very, very difficult kind of abuse, and it's very hard to fight it because authorities, they don't recognize it yet like that. It's very, very hard. Then we have the third one, which has been my whole life mission, fighting economic empowerment for victims. That means fighting economic abuse for women who have been trapped by abusers, who they don't have anymore the autonomy to use their own monies. Or, sometimes the abusers, they will take away their credit cards. They even take their cars so they cannot even drive. They destroy their credit. They steal from them. I mean, there's so many different cases that have been done by economic abuse as well. And fortunately, and I will explain that later when you ask me the question on VAWA,
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was able to fight it, and it's recognized inside VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. So grateful for that.
Right. It's amazing. Ludy, we're going to take a break. This is such important and demanding work. Let's return and talk more about the Resource Center, as well as your Second Chance Employment and even your podcast. So we have lots of important issues to continue. We'll break for a short public service announcement.
When I was 10, my mom got deported. We had a difficult time, and I feel that's why I didn't get to finish school.
Jessica has been through a lot in her life from early childhood.
My husband is really supportive in a way that he pushed me to go back to school.
She came in looking to complete her diploma. She had a family she had to take care of. Anytime she needed help, we provided her help. She realized that we were here for her.
She wants to have a career so her kids could look up to her.
My graduation, it was something I will never forget. I couldn't explain the emotion I was feeling because people like you and me sometimes may have doubts in ourselves, but I feel that everything's possible.
Jessica's future is brighter than ever.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Dr. Ludy Green, one of the world's foremost experts on economic empowerment for victims of abuse and domestic violence. We've been talking about her new initiative, a resource center for faith-based communities. Also, we'll find out a little bit about her podcast. Welcome back, Ludy.
Thank you so much.
Please add a bit more information about the faith-based communities.
So basically, the purpose of a creation of the policy is to help prevent violence against women and their families, as well as protect our families and our children, to get the faith-based community involved. I mean, from educating the congregation, the clergies, in what is domestic violence. Because many people don't know, believe it or not. Some people have lived under domestic abuse, so they do not understand this domestic abuse because that was a way they were living.
Oh.
So we need to educate the public what is domestic abuse and how can that impact others.
I see.
So and then my whole goal is to put training programs to elevate the awareness so we can take action before this get out of control in any case of abuse. So if something is coming on in a home, let's see, in a young couple, they just got married, so much stress, they have a just born baby, something financial occurs.
Right.
We can educate staff, who can educate people in the clergy to help us on how help that couple so they will not be out of control, that type of abuse that may be happening in this home.
I see. That's interesting. Yeah, go ahead. You had a little bit more?
And then, yes, a little bit more. So it's training the staff and members with a special emphasis on a small group of committed champions that they can lead these efforts on fighting violence against women. That's what I thought too. You know, and also we can develop an action plan that encourages women to step forward. So they ensure their safety and they safeguard with confidentiality. So they feel good that they know they're safe.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I like the idea from your employment agency and your book. You have plans and things for people, steps for people to follow. So it makes it much clearer for people to understand and the people involved in it to be able to help, hopefully, themselves as well. You were also one of the main contributors to the Violence Against Women Act of 2013, which is a federal law in the United States originally authored by Senator Biden in 1994.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's been reauthorized now. I was reading about that until 2027. So it's been under a number of administrations. Tell us actually what it is and what it does.
So basically, the Violence Against Women Act is a federal law that addresses domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and protects survivors regardless of their gender or sexual orientation. Provides programs by which you have programs on housing. You can have programs on training, legal assistance, emergency housing, transitional housing. And in 2013, I feel very honored that I had the opportunity to work with several senators and congressmen, and that they help us incorporate the second chance provision of 2013. On that provision, basically, we were recognized as second chance. It was an employment agency. So we are now a solution to end domestic violence through employment placement services and training. So now inside VAWA, we have that. So people who want to create organizations like ours, they can tap into that VAWA and obtain funds for those programs that addresses employment placement services and training for victims of abuse. And whoever is interested in the audience, interested in creating that, and they don't know where to find it, they can go on Transitional Housing Section B, and they will find the second chance provision by which provides those funding for individuals who want to create organizations that provide employment and training services for victims of abuse.
Wow. That's amazing to me that you thought of this. I think I kind of remember from the first half where you were saying something about you were in college, you did the survey, and then you followed up on it all these years. And it's been amazing, Ludy.
But also, I have to recognize the wonderful board of directors I had. And the one that I just lost, he just passed away, was Judge Mark Kennedy from Alabama, an amazing man, totally committed to the fight of violence against women and children, who has been my mentor. And he worked with me on this particular issue because it was difficult. We had to go through the whole VAWA to identify the place where we can suggest where it's going to be included, this provision. Yeah. So it was an effort for over a year. Right. And we had the support of other groups like Aaron Fox, where we were a lobbyist firm, amazing lobbyist firm. And so we feel like very, very honored to have had this opportunity and be part of this wonderful act.
Well, we're happy that you're doing all this. I also noticed that you have a bi-weekly podcast called Ending Domestic Abuse. So you're certainly busy. Ludy, tell us about the bi-weekly podcast.
So the podcast, as I mentioned before, we had the experience of a woman who came and slipped a note under the door of my home. Right, and it was a victim who we rescued. So from that podcast, I got inspired and I said, you know what about I create something during this lockdown time and COVID where people are so isolated that can connect people. And I started learning about podcasts. So I got a training and trained myself about how to create a podcast. And then I said, I'm going to call the mayor's office, and I called the head of the police department, and we can all work together and create this in partnership. Indeed, I did it. We created MOUs. We created a partnership with the chief of police and the mayor's office, and we became sort of like an organization. And we started inviting guests who were people top in their careers, experts in their different fields, that they can be like mentors, virtual mentors at the time, and influencers for possible victims of abuse. At the same time, the office of the mayor and the chief of police, they were sending, notifications when my podcast was going on. So it was going already to the community. So people were listening. So they knew we had a hotline, and they knew we had an email they can write if they need to be rescued or they need any help from us. That's how the whole thing started.
It's amazing. And what type of guests qualify to be on your podcast?
So basically, we have people in different fields. And they're individuals committed to help victims of abuse. So they have to have the heart for that and understand. And we have had top women in America, top leaders in our podcast you wouldn't even imagine. And not only that, women who have shared their stories, their personal stories of abuse, business leaders of this nation. There were a couple of them, not going to go. Anybody can discover who want to listen who they were. But top women in these nations who they share for first time their story in my podcast. And, we need to understand that many will be surprised, but domestic violence crosses all ethnics, all economics, and geographical boundaries. So that people need to understand. That's why you will find a person like one of the people who got shared in the podcast that they were abused, and nobody will ever believe it unless you listen. You listen to it.
Yeah. Where would I listen to this podcast?
Yes, you can go to Spotify. You can go to iTunes. You can go to Amazon Music, iHeart. We're all over. We have 7 platforms. So we're very excited to share it. And people, we have increased our listeners in a very, very large amount nationwide.
I see. Okay. And then tell us, where can people contact you?
Yes, please. If they can go to our website, ludygreen.com, LUDYGREEN.com. And they can find their hotline. They can find emails, so they can contact our producer of programs. And then we have my assistant. There's so many people that they can assist them in the needs they may have.
Oh, okay.
Also, our Twitter and Instagram at Dr. Ludy Green. So they have access to us at all times, 24/7 in a sense. And we have so many people in the community there to help.
Oh, that's great. So now we have how to contact you and where to listen to your podcast. Then how could somebody get involved in helping people with your new initiative or helping people suffering from domestic violence?
Yes, if somebody who's suffering from domestic violence, they communicate the same way. In the website, there's an email link, or there's also as well a number that they can contact, private number. They can go through that. And anybody who wants to volunteer as well, they can write us through that. And it will come directly to the people who are working for me. And then they will pass the information. And we'll be happy to embrace them, to help them in any way we can, and also bring them onto our new initiatives to improve the life of victims of abuse.
That's wonderful. Yeah. We have another minute. Is there something else that you'd like to add that I haven't asked you or we haven't mentioned so far?
Yes, I would like to share that this Saturday I will be at the Time to Fly Foundation. I will be a keynote speaker giving a presentation on this faith-based community initiative and discussing about my life story. And I want people to learn about the Time to Fly Foundation. It's a wonderful organization, and time2flyfoundation.org. They can learn about it. They work so hard, to help women recreate their lives through the religious institutions. They work with the religious institutions, and they have an amazing motto that I love. You are not alone.
Yeah, great. And not only this Saturday, but since hopefully we're going to show the show a few more times. So where can they find out where you're speaking?
Yes, also we put it also in our Instagram and all these different, social media. We promote it because I just spoke in Denver, Colorado. I spoke in Los Angeles. Then what was the other one? I was in Boston, Massachusetts. So different areas. Wherever they contact me, I will go. Sometimes the plan is a year ahead. Sometimes the plan is a couple months.
Right.
And I'm open always to be a guest speaker.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yes.
That's good information. Okay. Well, thank you, Ludy.
Thank you very much for having me again. To all this hard work, especially during this time on Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which is so needed to people to understand that it's an issue that's touching many of us around this country and around the world, and we need to combat it. So your work and your interview means a lot to so many, especially to the audience.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm trying, hopefully, to help you any way I can. So thank you for the extraordinary work and this important cause. I'm sure so many victims are very grateful to you as you pursue your position and your passion of helping victims of domestic violence.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It was lovely to spend time with you.
I enjoyed having you here, and I'm just amazed at your extraordinary work. Thank you from all of us. I hope you've enjoyed learning about Dr. Ludy Green and perhaps thinking about victims of domestic violence in a different way, and maybe getting involved yourself or involving your company in some manner. If you know a person, a woman actually, who would be a good guest for our show, please email us. We're womansworldtv@aol.com. Remember, it's a woman's world. I'm Carolyn Bruna. See you next time.